Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Deborah Pinkerton. Welcome to Morning Light.
So in just a minute, our Morning Light panel will go behind the headlines.
But first, here's a preview of what's coming up later in the show. Kirk Cameron is known by millions as Mike Seaver from the 1980 sitcom Growing Pains. Since then, Kirk is spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. I will talk with him live about his Strong Families, Strong Communities tour. Plus, learn details about his new children's program, Adventures with Iggy and Mr. Kirk.
In full disclosure, we've been playing the Growing Pains theme in the studio all morning.
Very excited to talk with him.
But you're not going to sing it before you're interviewed.
No, you're going to.
Well, a new White House faith-based office will investigate anti-Christian bias in America. But the new 2025 World Watch list from Open Doors shows some 310 million Christians worldwide face intense persecution every single day. What are the facts? Well, 4,476 Christians were killed for their faith last year alone. An almost equal number were detained or imprisoned for their faith. So is it time for American Christians to rethink our strategy and re-engage the issue of global persecution?
Yeah, that's such a somber thought to know so many people died because of proclaiming their faith.
A very simple act of going to church or possessing a Bible or sharing the good news with your neighbor could land you in prison or worse. Yeah.
Well, America's missionary movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many headquartered here in Pennsylvania, deployed tens of thousands of Christian workers to every continent. 60% were women. Today, the number of missionaries is just a fraction. In addition to engaging new immigrant groups, what obstacles keep this generation from seeing and hearing the call to global missions once again?
I guess the question is, have we stopped, has the call not stopped, or are we just not able to hear because of the distractions of our culture? I think it might be the latter.
Yeah.
Well, the Nepalese community is one of the fastest growing immigrant groups here in Pennsylvania. Thousands, of course, moving right next door, fleeing political and economic unrest in their home country. But according to International Christian Concern, persecution against Christian workers, including American missionaries, is on the rise. Get this, 17 Americans were detained this month alone. So what does it look like to love Nepali neighbors next door? And yes, around the world. We'll take these questions to the Morning Light panel this morning. And these are very tough questions, gentlemen, because they're issues that we don't confront on an everyday basis. We understand there's friction in America between people who follow Christ and government or culture, but there isn't this level of persecution. Let me give you some numbers to begin with. Last year alone, the stat I just mentioned, 4,476 Christians murdered last year alone. 7,679 churches and Christian properties attacked, and then 4,744 Christians imprisoned. Now, that's not a universal statistic about every single act. I mean, those are broad categories, different degrees of attacks. But when missionaries visit our church and they explain the brutality of the attacks against Christians, it's pretty significant. Davis, let me begin with you. What are we missing? Why isn't this a part of the conversation almost every Sunday at our church? I mean, some of our churches have persecution Sundays, but this is almost a discussion that doesn't happen anymore, but it used to.
Yeah, and I think we have lost, in many of our churches, there's just a need for revival, and we've lost the concept that our faith really does impact the world around us. And I think we've lost that. So we've lost that here in the United States, and if we don't believe it's going to have an impact and bless the world around us, we're not going to talk about the impact it's going to have globally. So you have a lot going on in society. Even discussions about, colonizers versus the oppressed and oppressive thoughts about Christianity and history, I think have caused us to take a step back from talking about the blessings of Christianity and the truth of the gospel. So I think there is a lot there to unpack. But it really does begin with our churches understanding the blessings that Scripture brings to all of life and being vocal about that. And then there's an impact.
So let me stay with this point on colonization, because that was a significant, the 19th, 20th century, especially British missionaries, American missionaries, were doing more than gospel work. They were often building villages, building hospitals, building institutions, and there's a rejection of that notion, it seems, that chapter of history is looked at askance.
No, and that's my point. We've sort of revitalized or changed how we view history. And again, now Christians are often in the public square apologizing for their faith,
right,
and not focusing on the blessings that comes from living out the gospel for all of life. And I think that has just cascading impacts, because we really have, as the American church, taken a step back from that. We have allowed the world to reframe what Christianity is, and we've lost the high ground.
So Dan, we're a blessed country. We're still the richest country. We're reminded of that every day, that we're rich, we're prosperous. But missions is not a large part generally of church budgets. Some churches, it is not a kind of, when you're talking to your children about what do you want to be when you grow up, that's not at the top of the list anymore. It used to be, pastor, doctor, lawyer, missionary, maybe in that group. What is the thread that we're losing here when it comes to missions?
I think certainly, when it comes to sharing your faith, often, there could be trepidation. There's, the thought of, I'm not doing this enough, and feeling down on yourself. And, I think when you look at the Great Commission, you look at the end of Matthew, what Jesus was saying to go forth and preach the gospel, it was out of love and not out of wrath. Sometimes I think, again, we go down on ourselves. I think, my pastor and other pastors, often if they preach a sermon, people can think, oh, I'm not doing this enough. And just needs to be part of the thread as a Christian,
right,
praying through and finding opportunities for ministry, finding ways to share the gospel, whether it's right in your hometown or thinking of ways, getting outside of your comfort zone. So I guess there's a need to talk about it more,
right,
the need to kind of get in commonplace. So much we're trying to put our faith under a rock, to not bring it into the public square, and I think that's having an impact on people's mind frame. So I think it needs to be more, we need to celebrate the gospel. We need to keep the doors open for the gospel. And so there's needs to reshape our mindset.
So that's helpful. Let me look at the list here of the top 50 countries. North Korea, these are the countries that have experienced significant persecution if you're a Christian. North Korea, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, Eritrea, Nigeria, Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, India, Saudi Arabia, Myanmar. The list goes on. What is it that we, as parents, when we're thinking about our children and we're thinking about safety and security, this is the conversation that happens all the time in Christian families. Why can't you do it closer to home? Why can't you do something here? We have so much need here. Are we competing against that too? Are we competing against the idea that there's so much need here? So countries that have difficulty, you don't want to see your son or daughter raise the grandchildren in a foreign land. What are we missing as a Christian church? Is it the sacrificial part? Is it just awareness? What is it?
I think it's a little bit of both, and I think there is this concept like, you don't want to be treated by a sick doctor. So if we're not healthy here at home, or there are needs here at home, why aren't we focusing on that instead of expanding into the world? But it really is a question of revival. We need revival here. Even the great missions movements of the past came from revival and sacrifice. And I think that when we don't, we idolize comfort far too often. And when we don't see that our children are being raised up as, warriors in the kingdom of God,
right,
and we don't have that mindset, that spiritual warfare mindset, I think it does lead into placing comfort or safety first, and we have to be careful about stifling God's calling.
So do you agree with that idea of comfort, that we are idolizing comfort? And what does that look like, do you think? When you think about raising your kids, it feels like safety in America is the number one concern. Safety, freedom, your personal. So we're not asking, is he right on that point, or do you have a different take?
There's a lot to be distracted by. Even raising kids myself, I can find, almost trying to make sure that their comfort level is taken care of or just protected. But I think ultimately, when I look at it, there's a need for prayer. I think there's God calls you into things, and whether that is overseas missions or helping a ministry locally, or just talking with your neighbor, there's things that God might place on your heart, but you need to open yourself up. You need to have those prayers. You need to take that time to seek out what is His will for you. And so I think there's that. We can be distracted by the day-to-day inner workings and get away from some of the meaningful conversations. And some of that is just, and I confess myself, the need to do more of just sitting down and prayer and what is God speaking to me. And I think through that, hopefully he does reveal things of opportunities that, so many that are persecuted for their faith. How can we help assist brothers and sisters in Christ?
Yeah. So let me shift. I want to close with, in Pennsylvania, we have seen over the years immigrant patterns, migration patterns. The Irish, the Italians, and there's always a faith component to that comes. In the 1980s, the Vietnamese, came to in a lot of cases, central Pennsylvania. Now the Nepalese and the Bhutanese, who are coming for their own religious persecution case, but the need in that community is both here, and then when you read the story of just this month, 17 American workers who were jailed under Nepali law or detained because they were suspected of sharing the gospel, and there's a rule against proselytization in Nepal. Is this an opportunity for us here? I mean, this sounds like a rhetorical question, but is it an opportunity? I know there's always friction when immigrant groups move in. What are they here for? What are they doing? But they've brought a lot of restaurants, beauty, culture. What is the opportunity, do you think, that a church locally can see with these population groups?
I think there are great opportunities, and I think we have to be willing to be creative about it. I've been involved in 2 different local churches in this area that were supporting missions in Nepal, but it has to be done very carefully, and it has to be done by planting businesses, supporting small businesses there that ministries can grow out of. But I think we can make a connection because we do have this entrepreneurial mindset from these folks that come here. So I think we can replicate that here and use their success here, getting them embedded in the community here, to then help people go back and start businesses there that can benefit the community, and they can bring their Christian faith into those businesses. And I think that's how the impact grows.
That's really interesting. When you think about missionaries, you think, the pith helmet, they look like they got, dressed, they look like Teddy Roosevelt, or they went to Banana Republic and got, an outfit for it. But really, what you're talking about is a very different kind of strategic mission. So your child's talents, when you're thinking about engaging them, can really be used in a whole lot of different ways. Closing thought from you on how we engage Nepalis and other neighbors here.
Yeah, a former pastor of mine is now a missionary in Nepal. And about 10 years ago, yes, their laws changed and there is much persecution. And he had a prayer request this week of they're bringing in Bibles that are translated into their language.
Pretty dangerous.
Just the prayer, right, it absolutely is. Yeah. So there's the power of prayer, like he emphasized, just the need for that. So we can do that here. And then also, yes, there are, Nepali families. I've been involved in helping to teach English with some of them. I have my hairstylist is from Nepal.
Did you just
been able
say
to talk
hairstylist and not Barbara? Really?
Well, to respect Mina. That was out of respect for her.
Right. But I've never been to a hairstylist for the record.
But just, the need to just serve them. They're coming over into a whole new world. And even just a simple thing of talking with them and speaking with them is kind to them.
Gentlemen, helpful thoughts. I hope this opens a new front in the conversation on missions. Well, thanks to our morning light panel for joining us today. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
As we shared at the top of the show, we were planning to talk with Kirk Cameron about his book tour and new children's program, but he is currently on his tour bus and we are told he is not available. So we're switching gears. He loves watching football and eating some good home cooking, but he also loves to talk about Jesus.
Well, you're going to love this story. Dano Burkhart was born with spina bifida. He lost his legs at age 6. An incredible personal story. He's undergone more than 50 surgeries. He had a stroke, underwent 2 kidney transplants. While all those medical procedures could leave him questioning God, Dano says it's his faith that caused him never to give up on God's plan for his life. Dano Burkhart, thank you for being with me on Morning Light.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here.
We've known each other a long time.
We have.
But I didn't know your whole life story.
Yeah.
And take us a little bit on the journey from age 6 to 43, which you don't look 43.
Yeah, I appreciate that. No, it's just, being born, I was born with spina bifida. As came as a complete shock, of course, to my parents. And having a baby that had a birth defect.
Other siblings?
Yeah, 2 older brothers, and they were all fine, perfectly healthy children, And then I'm born, and my legs were crippled, and then we later find out that my spine is only half grown, and I'm probably never going to be able to walk because of the way my legs were formed, and from the very beginning, that really started my whole faith process. Basically from my parents. Then, treating me like everybody else, treating me like my other siblings, and showing me that, hey, this is how God made me, and how he wanted me to be, and kind of growing up in that. And then, of course, when I turned 6, and then I needed to have my legs amputated, and they actually removed my legs and rebuilt my spine with my own leg bone. That was done in Shriners Hospital out in Portland, Oregon. And I was the second person in the world to ever have that surgery all done at once. So I had my legs amputated, my spine rebuilt. And that was kind of like my real first test of faith. I've learned about who God was and Bible stories, and VBS and things like that.
What was the story that you clung to in all of that?
Just basically that God was never going to leave me, and that my parents really instilled in me that I was who God wanted me to be, and that he was never going to leave me, and laying in a hospital bed, worrying about what a major surgery might be, or waking up from surgery and noticing that you're going to be different from everybody else the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Those legs that you think one day aren't going to straighten out and you're going to be able to walk are now gone. And how is that going to affect you?
And the challenges have not ended.
No, that is just something.
Kidney transplants.
I had my, even before that, I had multiple surgeries. I'm on surgery 51 now in 43 years. And most of them are major surgeries, from amputations to kidney transplants to major bone infections, where I actually had surgery on my back where I had developed an infection in my spine and things like that when I was 15. And then when I got through college in 2009, my kidney started failing due to a massive infection that I developed. And I went through that whole process of finding a kidney donor, which actually my brother ended up being my kidney donor, and overcoming that and going through the transplant and dialysis and things like that, where you're, coming through college and getting ready to start your career, you think,
right,
and you're stuck to a dialysis machine, 3 days
but
a week.
The story keeps going forward to forward to forward. It's not stopping.
No.
Then there's no pity.
Right. No, and that's one thing like I said, is with my parents is always, you can't live in that self-pity because it gets you nowhere, right? And drawing on your faith, of course, and who God is and who he's instilled in you and who he is by bringing you through certain things, knowing that you're able to face things that come up and challenges that come up, that you can kind of build on that. God brought me through that first surgery, and then he brought me through my first kidney transplant. And then, 9 years later, I'm having another kidney transplant. And God has really never left me through all that.
So take 30 seconds and give me a thumbnail of what you do now. What is life like now for you?
So I work full-time. I actually sell medical equipment now, selling wheelchairs and home medical equipment. Been doing that for the last 16 years now. But I also have a television show as well that I do in the mornings, on Sunday mornings on Fox here locally.
What's it called?
It's called Dano on the Counter. And it's a cooking show. So I actually climb up on the counter and I share a recipe through the first part of it. And I take people through the grocery store and I show them how I shop and how I drive and things like that. And then the last 5 minutes or so, 7 minutes or whatever, or I kind of share a story about what God has done in my life, and how God can have an impact on your life if you just hold on to that faith.
And I want you to stay with us. And when we come back, I want you to make it practical for people who are going through really hard times right now.
Welcome back. As you heard in our last segment, there are many reasons for Dano Burkhart to waver in his faith, but his health struggles have only helped him lean into God's will for his life.
So Dano let me know he's got bad days, but he chooses not to dwell on them. I asked Dano what advice he has for those struggling with these similar life circumstances. So Dano, when people are hearing this story and they go, okay, well, my problems just got really small. But really, if you're facing that, if it's parents are divorcing, if it is a diagnosis, even a small diagnosis or something that might feel insignificant, it's an uncertainty. How do you speak to fear, to people's fears, real life? How do you confront it with faith?
Really, I look at what God has done in my life, obviously, and I look at what God has done in other people's lives, and I kind of take that for what it is. That God has brought you through today. He's brought you through to today, I should say. You're able to wake up and take that breath in. And you should be thankful for what you do have, obviously, and what God has done to bring you here. But also then face that challenge and say, if God brought me to it, He's going to bring me through it. That's kind of the motto that I kind of always live by. That if God put this challenge, there's a reason why. Because maybe I'm going to grow in my faith, but I'm also going to maybe have an impact on somebody else. They're going to see God in me in what He's brought me through. Show by putting a smile on your face and saying, you know what, this is...
You are always smiling.
Yeah, I try. And I mean, I do have bad days, but I honestly don't let it last more than 24 hours.
So how do you fight through that? When you feel doubt, depression, darkness kind of coming in, what is your battle plan for those moments?
Yeah, I try not to dwell on things more than a day. I really do. I kind of face them head on to where I'm like, this is a tough situation, something that I don't really know what the outcome is going to be. But I really do believe God is going to bring me through it. And I'm not going to doubt Him now because He's brought me through so much. So I'm going to give it all to Him and let Him work out what He needs to in my life and put the right things in place to get me through this. And I know that not everybody's going to have the greatest outcomes and everything either. But I just really feel that...
Because it doesn't always turn out great.
Yeah, it doesn't turn out great. You might get that horrible diagnosis that there might not be a kidney for you or something like that, But I really feel that if you give it to God and give it all to Him, He's really going to give you the peace and comfort to get you through that. And that may be just what you need. You might just need to have the peace about it, not the actual outcome or the healing. But, if you can just show that, hey, I'm relying on Him, it may really impact your life and then others. And then, they come back to you and say, hey, I see you going to work every day and going through this. That really encourages me to go, help me get through what I'm going through. And I think
you've got to get that sense wherever you go. That someone is comparing their situation and saying, but how do you point them to Jesus? How do you point them to hope?
Yeah, I really, if I get an opportunity to talk to them, because they'll ask me, they'll say, hey, how do you get through this? Or how is this, you're not overwhelmed or just sitting at home not wanting to do anything? And I say, well, because, I've got the joy of the Lord in my heart, and God, I feel that doesn't want us to live in that and live in that pity. I think He wants us to have faith and have joy in our faith and take that each and every day, whatever our struggles may be, that, hey, we can get through it as long as we rely on Him.
That's the final word. Dano, it's awesome to see you, brother.
Always a
Thank
pleasure.
You very much. Dano is extraordinary, but as you hear, Deborah, in what he's saying, it has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do. This is not the power of positive thinking. This is him saying, God had a plan for my life, and it included these roadblocks and obstacles, and I'm going to embrace them knowing that He has me.
Yeah, he looks amazing, and it's hard to believe that he's had 50-plus surgeries.
Yeah, I've known him for 20 years, and that joy has not abated at all.
Wow, that is wonderful.
For those of you living in Pennsylvania, you can watch Dano on the Counter Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. on Fox 8 before church, or you can check out his YouTube and Facebook pages. Stay with us. We'll be back after the break.
Welcome back. Coming up tomorrow on Morning Light. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so what does the Bible really say about love, not only between husbands and wives, but all those we come in contact with? Plus, a couple shares how their faith has helped them keep their marriage strong over the years. And that's a look at what's coming up tomorrow on Morning Light. Now, Jeff, Your closing thoughts?
Well, thank you, Deborah. Well, in the winter of 1956, Americans were gripped by the story of a 29-year-old missionary, Jim Elliot, and his 4 companions who moved their families to reach an isolated tribe in the Ecuadorian jungle. For days, the men flew a tiny little Piper Club airplane over the tribe's location, delivering gifts from an overhead basket, building a friendship. When the moment for that face-to-face encounter happened, they landed the plane on a strip of sand, and all the men were violently speared to death. To many, the story still seems like a preventable waste, a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. Talent and potential that could have been used right here in America, reaching the needs of the civilized and the safe. But Mr. Elliot said his well-fed church at home didn't need his help. His calling was to those who've never heard. In the wake of the loss, the tribe was converted, and hundreds of thousands of young missionaries left American comfort in the 1960s to reach the lost. Books and movies amplified their stories, and this quote from Jim Elliot defined their generation. "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Our culture is desperate for mission, for purpose, for a shred of meaning. For more than American aid or military help, they need hope only the gospel provides. And if you want to be inspired, watch The End of the Spear. It'll change your life. For Deborah and the entire Morning Light team, I'm Jeff Goldman. Check on your neighbors. We'll see you tomorrow.